A thin layer of silver ash coated the landing deck of Viridian Spire, Ares Prime's once vibrant capital. The atmosphere shimmered with a violet haze, a result of constant energy flares from the fractured power grid. Amidst the flickering light, a long, slender transport vessel touched down with a hiss of decompressing air and a dull thud that echoed across the near-deserted platform. Darren Salas stepped off the ramp, the dry wind immediately tugging at the hem of his dark, long coat. He paused, scanning the horizon with eyes that had seen too many war zones, too many broken planets. Yet this world, the fractured jewel of the Every, still carried a strange sort of elegance, like a palace on fire. He wasn't supposed to be here. 2 years ago, Darren had been a celebrated human diplomat with postings from the Ether Belt to the Terralun courts. He'd defused crises, forged coalitions, and spoken in auditoriums filled with thousands. But after the Unity collapse, a political scandal with his name smeared across the headlines, he'd vanished. Now, he was back in play. Not as an envoy. Not as a representative of Earth. He was here as a favor owed and a gamble made. A tall figure approached, flanked by 2 others in armor that glowed with faint iridescence. The lead woman was striking, 6-fingered hands, copper-toned skin speckled with luminescent freckles, and a regal presence that made her long crimson robes ripple like flame. "You are Darren Salas?" she asked. Her voice was low, musical, laced with an accent that danced across consonants. "I've been told I am," Darren replied, adjusting the strap of his travel bag. "I am Lady Sarave Tile. I speak for the Council of Northreach. You were summoned as a neutral party. We were told you have no stake in Every politics." Darren smiled thinly. "Isn't that exactly what makes me dangerous?" She tilted her head, studying him with sharp, cat-like pupils. "You're here because someone believes you can save a girl marked for execution. That someone is my brother, and for reasons beyond my understanding, he trusts you." Darren followed her down a narrow hallway into a waiting transport. The inside smelled of ozone and spiced herbs. "You believe I can't. I believe you're a human. And humans come with 2 things, chaos and stories. We're gambling on both." The journey to the Spire's inner sanctum was brief. As the doors hissed open, Darren was struck by the silence. There were no palace attendants, no ceremonial guards lining the corridor. Just the deep hum of distant machinery and an occasional tremor underfoot. "What happened to this place?" he asked, his boots echoing off the cracked marble. "Ares Prime has been bleeding for 5 years, Sarave said without emotion. The North blames the South. The South blames the monarchy. The monarchy blames the stars. And the people," she paused at a large, sealed door, "blame her." She gestured to a security panel. It scanned her palm, then her eye. The door unsealed with a pressurized sigh. Inside, the chamber was dim and cool. Chains hung from the ceiling, but they weren't in use. Instead, a single figure sat on a raised dais in the center of the room, ankles crossed, wrists resting loosely on her knees, like a woman at peace with being caged. Her skin shimmered a deep shade of lavender, hair falling around her like silver mist. She wore no finery, only a simple linen robe tied at the waist. When she looked up, her eyes met Darren's with calm curiosity, as though she'd been expecting him for years. "This is Vaila," Sarave said. Darren stepped forward, offering a small bow. "Vaila Taranai. Former ambassador, current traitor." "If the court says it, it must be true," she said evenly, her voice melodic, almost amused. "I don't trust courts," Darren replied. "Then we might get along." He circled the dais, studying her as she studied him. "You were caught transferring diplomatic codes to the South Dominion during a weapons lockdown. The transmission was traced to your quarters. The council says you sold secrets. Your defenders say the signal was fabricated." She didn't flinch. "And what do you say?" "I say you're the only living daughter of House Taranai. Killing you would fracture the nobility and start a war neither side is ready to win." Which makes this less a trial and more an execution of convenience. Saravea's voice was sharp from behind. That's dangerously close to blasphemy. It's also accurate, Darren said. I wasn't brought here to flatter anyone. Vaila looked up at him then, something soft behind her eyes. Then why were you brought? He exhaled. Because I'm willing to die trying to prevent another war. Because your brother asked. And because, he hesitated, I used to believe in saving people. You stopped? She asked quietly. I lost someone I couldn't save, he said, voice a little rougher than he meant. She held his gaze. Then help me. Not for the court. Not for peace. For you. Sarave looked away, her posture stiffening. Time is short. The court convenes in 3 days. The Southern Fleet is already posturing near the border. If we don't convince them she's innocent, or at least politically valuable, the execution goes forward. Darren nodded. Then I want full access to the evidence. Uncensored. I want to speak to the investigating magistrate, the palace staff, and Vaila, alone. You're not Every, Sarave warned. The court barely tolerates your presence. Then they'd better get used to me. Later that night, Darren stood in the old archive chamber, a sphere of projection data flickering before him. Images, audio logs, security tapes, all cross-referenced and time-stamped. On the surface, the case against Vaila was airtight. But as he scanned the records, inconsistencies began to whisper at him. A 15-second lag in the surveillance footage. Missing logs from the signal tower on the east wing. Testimony redacted from 2 maintenance staff who'd last seen Vaila before the incident. He was still piecing it together when a soft chime echoed from the door. He opened it to find Vaila, unchained, barefoot, and carrying a small ceramic teapot. You're not supposed to be out of your cell, Darren said, more amused than surprised. The door wasn't locked, she replied. And I thought you could use something warm. She stepped inside, poured him a cup of tea that smelled like cinnamon and sea salt. They sat across from each other, the glow of the projector illuminating her face. You're wasting your time, she said softly. They made up their minds before I ever stood trial. I've overturned worse. Why? She asked. He hesitated. Because someone once believed I could. Vaila tilted her head. Do you always speak in riddles? Only when I'm terrified. She laughed, a sound that made something deep in Darren's chest stir. It had been a long time since he'd heard laughter without bitterness. Tell me, she said, her eyes glinting, what did you see in the records? I saw a lie, he replied. One carefully designed to look like the truth. Someone wanted you gone. Not disgraced. Erased. Vaila's smile faded. Then they nearly succeeded. Darren leaned closer. You said they weren't locked, your cell doors. She nodded slowly. Why didn't you leave? I was waiting, she said. For someone who might still believe I'm worth saving. The silence between them grew charged, intimate. Darren reached out, his fingers brushing hers. Her skin was cool, smooth like polished stone, but a pulse fluttered beneath it, fast and real. You waited for me? He asked quietly. I didn't know your name, she whispered. But I knew someone would come. He leaned in further, his voice barely audible. Then let's make them regret ever thinking you could be erased. Their lips hovered close, an electric moment suspended in starlight and breath. And then the door burst open. Lady Sarave stormed in, eyes blazing. What in the ancient names is going on here? Vaila straightened, calm as ever. Tea. And truth. Sarave looked between them, her face a mix of frustration and disbelief. The court will devour you both if you play this like a romance. Darren stood slowly. Then they'll choke on it. It was in the quiet hours before dawn that Nirul Inari felt most alive. The garden atop the east wing of the spire had long since been abandoned, flowers overgrown, walkways cracked with creeping vines, and the wind constantly whispering through broken glass canopies. But this place remembered her. And she remembered it. Here, her mother once taught her how to graft moon fruits. Here, she and her younger sister, Vaila, used to build castles from fire ash petals and pretend they were queens of a peaceful realm. That had been before the war. Before accusations turned siblings into strangers. Niril knelt by a bed of white thorns blooming with bioluminescent tips, snipping gently with her gloved fingers. She crushed one of the petals between her fingers and inhaled. The smell, sweet, heady, and slightly metallic, still brought tears to her eyes. "They only bloom for those who remember," came a voice behind her. She froze. Slowly, she rose to her feet and turned. There he was, Kalen Voss. The last person she expected. The only person she had ever truly loved. And the one who had left without a word. He stood in shadow, wrapped in a threadbare cloak, face partially hidden beneath a hood. But even after 6 years, she knew that voice. "Kalen," she said softly. Her heart stuttered. "You're supposed to be dead." He stepped forward, slowly removing the hood. His features hadn't changed much, silver hair cropped short, violet eyes intense as ever. But there was where now. The kind that came from guilt. "I was," he replied. "Until I heard what they were planning for your sister." "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why come back now?" Kalen looked at her the way he used to, like she was the only light left in a dark universe. "Because the last thing I did before I left was abandon you. And the last thing I want to do before I die is protect the people I failed." Niril swallowed, hard. She turned back to her plants, kneeling again to hide the shaking in her hands. "You're a traitor," she said, clipping more blooms. "They said you defected to the Southern Dominion." "I did," he said. "But not for the reasons they believe." She dared a glance over her shoulder. "Explain." He sat on the edge of the cracked fountain behind her, where once a sculpture of the twin moons had stood. "I joined their Peace Corps, Niril. Not their military. I built refugee stations. Fed starving children. I patched wounded soldiers, northern and southern alike. I ran when both sides started hunting the ones who refused to carry weapons." "And why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice sharp. "I was trying to protect you." "You didn't protect me," she said bitterly. "You left me." They let that hang in the air for a moment. Wind stirred the petals around them. The smell of earth and sorrow. Finally, he said, "I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just time. Time to help you." "Help her." Niril stood and faced him fully, crossing her arms. "What do you know about Vaila's case?" "I know she's innocent. And I know the transmission they claim she sent came from coordinates tied to the Dominion's decommissioned signal towers, towers I helped dismantle." Niril narrowed her eyes. "You still have access." "Some," he said carefully. "I burned most of my ties when I escaped, but there are still people who owe me favors." She studied him. He wasn't lying. Kalen had never been good at it. "I should report you," she said. He shrugged. "You won't." "And why not?" His eyes softened. "Because part of you still believes in me." She wanted to deny it. Wanted to turn her back and walk away. But her feet didn't move. "I hate you," she whispered. "I know. I trusted you with everything. I know. And now you think you can just come back, stir the ashes, and pretend you were a fire?" He stood slowly. "I'm not pretending anything, Niril. I'm here. And I want to help." The garden fell silent except for the hum of distant energy lines. Then, without warning, she slapped him. The sound echoed like a thunderclap. He didn't react. He just took a deep breath and let it out. She stared at him for a moment longer, and then fell into his arms. They stood there, entwined beneath the ruined canopy, the early light of dawn piercing through a broken pane above them. Later that day, in the Spire's subterranean archives, Nero guided Kalen through the restricted corridors using her healer's clearance. They walked side by side, saying little. "I never asked," Kalen said quietly. "What have you been doing since?" "Since you abandoned me," she replied flatly. "I became a palace physician. Not for the court. For the people. I run clinics in the lower tiers. When I'm not being watched. And the court allows it. They let me pretend I'm still useful." They reached a sealed chamber. She keyed in a sequence of ancient glyphs. The lock responded with a low click, and the doors hissed open. Inside, ancient memory drives glowed softly. They stepped inside. "This room holds transmissions filtered through every active and decommissioned relay on Ares Prime," she explained. "It's how the court matches incoming data to crime events." Kalen moved to one of the crystalline consoles, fingers gliding over the interface. "Show me the exact moment of the transmission they say Vaila sent," he said. Nero activated the log. A 4-second gap in the spectrum analysis. Kalen frowned. "That's a signature mask. Someone rerouted the original signal to pass through a Dominion frequency, after masking its origin. So, not from Vaila's chambers. Not unless she teleported out of the palace, faked the timestamp, and returned in 2 seconds. Nero exhaled shakily. "Then we can prove she didn't do it." "Not yet," Kalen said. "But it's a crack. I can trace the mask." He looked over at her. "You're risking your life helping me." She shrugged. "You taught me to follow the truth, Kalen. Even if it burns." He stepped closer. She didn't back away this time. "I never stopped loving you," he said. Her breath hitched. "I tried," he added, almost laughing. "I really tried." Nero leaned in slowly, her fingers brushing his jaw. "I don't forgive you yet," she said. "I know. But I still love you too." They kissed, tentative, aching, a reunion of hearts pulled too long apart. By nightfall, they'd tracked the masked transmission to a rogue node station in the Oralise Wastes, Southern Dominion territory, now lawless and abandoned. "If we go," Kalen said, strapping his old knife to his belt, "we go alone. No court guards. No signals." Nero was already packing a satchel of medical supplies. "Then let's leave before anyone can stop us." They boarded a smuggler skiff at dusk, Nero's clearance waving off security with a forged aid mission. As the spire faded behind them, Kalen looked at her, wind tousling his silver hair. "You know," he said, "when we were children, I always imagined us growing old together in a house like the ones in the outer provinces." She smiled sadly. "And I always imagined you'd leave. You just took longer than expected." He reached for her hand. "This time, I'll stay." The Oralise Wastes greeted them with ash storms and silence. The rogue node station stood like a corpse from a forgotten war, half buried, flickering with broken lights. Inside, Kalen bypassed the security locks using Southern override codes. They found the broadcast origin buried under years of dust and decayed wiring, a falsified link tethered to a ghost protocol known as Operation Emberglass. Nero's blood ran cold. Emberglass was a covert Dominion program. It was terminated after the public revolt. Why would they resurrect it? "They didn't," Kalen said grimly. "Someone on our side did." Her eyes widened. "You mean? Someone in the Northern Court orchestrated this?" "They planted the signal through an abandoned Southern node, making it look like Vaila was the traitor. But the real betrayal came from home." Nero staggered back. Her hands trembled. Kalen caught her. "We have to return. We have to tell them." She looked at him, tears in her eyes. They won't listen. Not unless we show them. Then we show them. He pulled her into his arms. She clung to him, pressing her face to his chest. Whatever happens next, she whispered, don't let go again. I swear on every star, he said. As the skiff roared to life and began the return to Viridian Spire, Nero realized something. Truth was no longer the goal. Love was. And with Kaelin by her side, even the court's fury could not unmake what had just begun. Tauren Voss did not believe in war. He believed in structure. Logic. Measured responses to irrational chaos. He believed in the Dominion's original purpose, unity through progress. But war. War was a symptom of failure. A spiral of fear dressed up in banners and commands. And yet here he was, deep in northern territory, draped in a false identity, about to enter an unauthorized summit between rebel factions. His official orders were clear: observe, record, do not engage. But Tauren had long since stopped obeying orders issued by a council that silenced diplomats faster than they funded peace talks. He stepped into the underground atrium known as the Ember Vault, hidden beneath the ruins of an old crystal temple. The summit had been arranged in secret, organized by radicals who no longer saw value in flags or borders. He was here because he believed they might be right. But he stayed because of her. She stood at the far end of the room, arguing with a rebel engineer over faulty translator drones. Her posture was all sharp lines and defiance, her wild hair tied back in a loose braid that fell down her spine like a line of fire. Her name was Serene Kor. A resistance leader. Northern. Wanted in 3 sectors. Unofficially declared a terrorist. But in the 2 covert meetings Tauren had shared with her, she'd become something else, an unexpected ally, and something more dangerous, a woman who made him forget the difference between enemy and home. He approached slowly, waiting until she noticed him. Her eyes flicked to him, dark and bright all at once. Voss. Kor, he replied, trying to suppress the rush in his chest at hearing her voice. You're late. I'm precisely on time. You're early. She snorted. Still playing diplomat, huh? It's not a performance if you believe it. She folded her arms, the fabric of her worn jacket pulling tight over her shoulders. You still wearing that southern insignia under your cloak? He hesitated. I burned it. Her gaze softened, just slightly. Good. I'd hate to kiss someone wearing the mark of a war criminal. Tauren blinked. You're thinking about kissing me? She looked amused. I think about a lot of things, strategist. That's not the same as doing them. I don't think, Tauren said, stepping closer, I want to wait much longer. Their lips met with quiet intensity, heat wrapped in restraint. It wasn't wild, but it was real. The kiss of 2 people who'd spent too long pretending they didn't want to cross that line. When they broke apart, breathless, Serene didn't smile. She looked away, jaw tight. This is a terrible idea. I know, Tauren whispered. We could be killed for this. Yes. She looked back at him, frustration and longing tangled in her features. Then why does it feel like the only honest thing in this whole fucking war? Because it was. Later that night, the summit began. Leaders of splinter cells from both sides gathered in a circle. Some wore rags. Others still bore medals from forgotten armies. Their faces were tired. Suspicious. Hopeful. Tauren sat beside Serene, his role undisclosed. He wasn't here as a Dominion officer. He was here as a man looking for something better. The debates were intense. We can't just dissolve our factions, one rebel growled. The council will crush us the moment we lose our structure. They're already crushing us, another spat. Half my city's starving while they build sky chariots for their elite. We need a neutral proposal, Serene said. Something that makes them listen without forcing surrender. A show of unity they can't ignore. They won't listen, came the response. They never have. They'll listen to him, she said. All eyes turned to Tauren. He stood slowly, adjusting his cloak. I am Tauren Voss, he said. Born of the Dominion. Raised in its academies. Taught to believe in order above all else. A hush fell. I still believe in order. But not through fear. Not through control. I believe in logic. And it is no longer logical to remain divided. Someone scoffed. Is that a speech or a surrender? It's a fact, Tauren replied calmly. Your enemies do not fear you. They expect you. They rely on your rage, your patterns, your fire. What they don't expect is for you to offer them peace with dignity. That scares them. He let the word settle. I propose a demonstration. Not violence. A gesture of cooperation. We rebuild the ancient bridge of Roland Pass. Together. Dominion and Northern volunteers. Live streamed. Broadcasted to every corner of Ares Prime. Murmurs rippled through the room. The bridge was destroyed in the first month of war, someone said. Exactly, Tauren replied. Rebuilding it is more than symbolism. It's a statement. The people want to believe peace is possible. Give them something to believe in. Serain watched him with open awe, as if seeing him for the first time. Even if it worked, a skeptical rebel said, who would lead it? Tauren didn't hesitate. I will. And if the Dominion finds out who you are, then I'll finally stop being a ghost. That night, Serain found him sitting alone near the edge of the ruins, watching distant lightning dance across the mountains. She sat beside him in silence. You were brilliant, she said finally. I was honest, he replied. That's rare enough. They sat shoulder to shoulder. No words. Just quiet breathing, shared warmth. Finally, she said, I'm afraid. He turned. Of what? Of hoping. Of losing you. Of what happens if this works. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. We survive either way, he said softly. But I'd rather survive with you. She leaned into him then, resting her head on his shoulder. When this is over, she whispered, I want to build something with you. Something that doesn't burn. Tauren smiled. Then let's start with the bridge. The broadcast began 1 week later. Hundreds of citizens, both Dominion and Northern, joined together at the Roland Pass ruins. Supplies poured in from sympathetic cities. Neutral medics stood by. Cameras hovered above. Tauren and Serain stood side by side in work garb, covered in dust and sweat. The people called them fools. Then dreamers. Then heroes. Brick by brick, the bridge took shape again. Not just of stone and steel, but of belief. But peace is always a threat to those who profit from war. On the 9th day, a Dominion war drone appeared on the horizon. The crowd panicked. Tauren stepped forward, arms raised. It's a test, he whispered to Serain. If we run, they fire. If we stand, you'll die. Not alone. The drone hovered. Paused. Scanned. And then turned away. Cheers erupted. Tears flowed. The world had watched, and saw courage where they'd expected retreat. That night, Tauren held Serain beneath the stars. No longer strangers. No longer enemies. Just two people who chose to believe. We did it, she whispered. No, he said, pressing his lips to her temple. We started it. The cell was not cold, not truly. The heat vents hummed softly overhead, and woven thermal threads in the flooring kept the temperature regulated. But Lyri then had never known a colder place. The chill wasn't in her skin, it was in the silence. She didn't mark time anymore. There were no windows in this wing of the palace. No sky, no stars. Just a slate of lightless hours, interrupted by meals delivered through a slot and an occasional shifting of the air systems when the guards changed shifts. If not for him, she would have forgotten her name. His footsteps had become her only calendar. The soft, deliberate pace of someone who never rushed. The way he paused just before her cell, like he was collecting something inside himself. He never said much, not at first. Just brought her water, checked her restraints, and left. But one day, he spoke. "Do you miss the stars?" She looked up, startled by the sound of a real voice. Deep. Gentle. Unaccented. Not northern. Not southern. Neutral. "I try not to," she said. The man's face was mostly shadowed by the guard visor, but she could see his mouth tighten, almost like he was smiling. "I brought something," he said. She didn't move as he held up a tiny device between the bars, a pocket hollow, old and scratched, barely functional. He activated it. The ceiling of her cell flickered, and above her, a faint, flickering dome of stars appeared. Not perfect. Not even accurate. But it shimmered. It danced. She inhaled sharply as the constellations swirled overhead, a mock sky where her real one had been stolen. "I'm not supposed to give prisoners tech," he said. "Then why did you?" "Because everyone deserves a piece of the sky." She stared at him, something unraveling inside her. "What's your name?" He hesitated. "Yoren." "You're not a palace guard," she said quietly. "No." She waited. "I'm an archivist." "Or I was. They reallocated me after the bombings. Said I knew how to keep things quiet." Leary studied him. His eyes were soft. Brown. Human. "You're from the Terran colonies," she guessed. He nodded. "What's a Terran doing in the royal palace of Ares Prime?" "Hiding," he said simply. "Just like you." Over the weeks, Yoren became her morning and her night. They spoke in fragments, books they'd read, myths they remembered, music that still echoed in their minds. She learned he had once been a poet. That he used to write verses in the margins of data scrolls. "You still write?" she asked one evening. He nodded. Then slid something between the bars. It was a folded piece of paper, actual paper, rare and forbidden in the palace. She opened it. The poem was short. Sparse. They buried her beneath silence. But she grew louder in my chest. A secret carved in breathing. Her name, my only rest. Leary stared at it, heart hammering. "You wrote this?" she asked. "For you," he said. She reached through the bars, slowly, and touched his hand. They never kissed. There was no room, no privacy, no chance. But in that impossible space, love bloomed quietly. Like moss in cracks of stone. He snuck her a packet of citrus tea once. Another time, he brought a harmonica and played softly until she fell asleep. He described the sky outside each day. Told her which moons were visible. What color the clouds were. "Why do you come back?" she asked one night. Yoren's hand rested against the cell bars, their fingers not quite touching. "Because you make me feel alive again." She closed her eyes. "You make me feel like I'm still human." Everything changed the day the summons came. A court officer in silver robes arrived, flanked by soldiers. Leary heard the boots first, then the voice. "Leary then, daughter of Counselor Anven, you are to be transferred to Tribunal Chamber 9. You will stand trial for crimes against the Crown." Yoren was at his post. He stepped in front of her cell before the guards could reach her. "She's not ready," he said. "She hasn't had legal counsel. This violates protocol." "She's had enough time," the officer replied. "Stand aside." Yoren didn't move. The officer signaled one of the guards. A stun rod crackled. Leary saw it coming. "No," she shouted. But Yoren stood his ground. The rod hit him full in the chest. He collapsed. The guards stormed in and dragged her away. The courtroom was filled with light but no warmth. The walls shimmered with projected evidence, data streams, blurred images, voice samples distorted by static. Leary stood alone at the center of the chamber, bound at the wrists. Her hair had grown long again, curling past her shoulders. Her robes were simple. Her dignity intact. She didn't flinch when the accusations were read. But when the presiding judge demanded a confession, she raised her chin. "I will not confess to a crime I didn't commit." "You transmitted coordinates to a Dominion fleet," the prosecutor said. "I didn't," she said simply. The judge leaned forward. "Then explain the signal." "I can't. But I know someone who can." Murmurs swept the chamber. "Who?" the judge asked. The doors at the back opened. Yoren entered, bandaged, limping, but standing tall. He was flanked by Neril and Kalen, both carrying sealed drives. Neril's voice rang clear. "This trial is a farce. The evidence was fabricated. The transmission was rerouted through a node in Orelise." Kalen stepped forward. "We have the original signature mask. And the log of the technician who buried it, on orders from your own court." The judge tried to object, but the room exploded in voices. Yoren walked to Leary. He didn't ask permission. He kissed her. The courtroom fell silent. "This woman," he said, "taught me how to believe again. And she's the only honest person in this palace." Leary's lips trembled. "I thought I'd never see the sky again." Yoren cupped her face. "You are the sky." Later, as the court was forced to release her, Leary stood beneath real starlight again for the first time in a year. Yoren was at her side, his arm around her. "Do you still write poetry?" she asked. "I do," he said. "Then write one about this moment." He smiled. "I already did." He reached into his coat and pulled out a slip of paper. She stepped from the cage. Not broken, but blazing. The galaxy didn't know it yet. But its future had just changed. Leary took his hand. Together, they walked into the night.